people told me over and over yesterday. It was less of an angry mob and more of an anguished mob. Obviously, tears streaming down their face from the use of tear gas. I counted volley after volley, canister after canister, about 20 every 10 minutes. More tear gas than I've seen in any protest in over 10 years in the Middle East used, probably because the police have never had to put down mass demonstrations like this before, because there's been a state of emergency for so many years, because people aren't allowed to protest. But since they shut off the internet and the cell phones, people just spread the word of mouth, even at one point walking down the street, telling people to come out of their houses to join the protest, and they did. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger all day. I could see pockets of tear gas in different parts of neighborhoods across Egypt. But back to the anguish, people kept saying, tell your president what's happening. You have a democracy. They're supporting a dictatorship. At one point, as tanks were coming in and APCs, armored personnel carriers, were going past the demonstrators, demonstrators asked me in English and Arabic, does anyone know? Because their TV stations have been shut off, their cell phones were shut off while they were demonstrating. They didn't even know if anybody in the world was watching. Myself and another colleague, a different reporter, had to tell them that it was front page news, that everybody in the world was watching. They didn't know. And then they said, what is President Obama doing? Which was very interesting, because they remember him coming here in his speech in June of 2009. And one of the demonstrations was happening right outside the university, where he spoke, extending a hand to the Arab world from the U.S., trying to broker better relations. But yesterday, all of this happening with people encouraging each other, and a cross-section of society I saw, from little boys with dirty feet and no shoes to men in suits to women with their teenage daughters on the street. At one point earlier in the day, I saw people carrying their toddlers into the protest. Greta?
Courtney, is this, I take it that when President Mubarak said that he was getting rid of his cabinet, but he's staying, that's not enough. And secondly, do you know, what do the protesters want? Do they want democracy, or do they want an Islamic republic? What is it they're looking for?
This is a secular demonstration with no extremism rhetoric whatsoever. Like I said before, they don't even know if their message is necessarily getting out, but their message has been crystallized, which is, we want Mubarak out. It's all about Mubarak. It's not about his government. It's not about him going on TV, keeping the internet turned off, keeping cell phones turned off, and then just deciding to make his own changes. It's all about Mubarak. The chants for out Mubarak, clearly about him. And then, again, not the kind of protests I've seen in the Arab world that hinge on religious extremism or anger. It's about, people have said, we only want the right to peaceful protest. We just want to go to Tahrir Square and stage a sit-in. When they could, they didn't fight with the army. At some points, the army extended a hand. At one point, I saw demonstrators get on armored personnel carriers, cheering as they went through the crowd. So it would shift. They clearly have issues with the police, and I saw police brutality in front of my eyes on the overpass. There are undercover policemen in plain clothes that were beating people in the crowd with batons. I also saw very, very little violence. The message in the crowd was, don't do anything. Even the poorest people, looting was not encouraged. I saw one person walking away with an air conditioner, maybe from the ruling party headquarters before it went completely up in flames, or somewhere else, and people started shouting on the street, Harami, Harami, which means thief, thief. Clearly, even though most people here live under the poverty line of $2 a day, looting was discouraged. But again, people didn't even know if these messages were going out anywhere. They didn't know that they were on TV. They didn't know that the president was speaking or was going to speak.
Courtney, thank you. Be safe.
You, Greta.
Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, joins us. Good evening, Ambassador. And if President Mubarak goes, something has to replace it.
Well, I think we need to distinguish between the fundamental source of power in Egypt, which is the military, and the Mubarak regime. Mubarak is a former general, former head of the Air Force. He is closely allied with the military. But honestly, at this point, whether he goes or stays is less important than whether the military stays in control. There's a lot going on here. This is a very complex, very fast-moving situation, and I would beg to disagree a little bit with that last reporter. We are not on the verge of the dawning of the age of Aquarius in Egypt if only the demonstrators get their way. It's a lot more complex than that.
Well, you know, I was reading today about was the protests also going on in Jordan. And in Jordan, it seems that there's very perilous there, too. And it's one thing if these two...
...for a long time. I don't have any doubt the demonstration in Egypt was triggered by what happened in Tunisia. But I also don't have any doubt that the Muslim Brotherhood has watched this. Today, after the Friday prayers, the Muslim Brotherhood's supporters went out into the street, too, which explains the increase in violence. We're in a very, very dangerous situation here.
How is this similar to and different to what happened in Iran in June of 2009 when they had the election of Ahmadinejad and the protesters took to the street? Well,
one notable difference is the reaction of the President of the United States. But I think fundamentally the situations are really quite different from the U.S. strategic point of view. The opposition in Iran, if we had been supporting it, might well have been in a position to split the Iranian military and bring the regime down. Here, as of now, we don't see any evidence that the military is splitting. Mubarak has sent his family to England. I don't read that as lack of confidence. I read that as Mubarak clearing the decks and getting ready to fight.
So what's going to happen, do you think?
Well, I think the military will now bend every effort to split the Muslim Brotherhood away from those idealistic student demonstrators, which is going to be hard given the curriculum at most Egyptian universities with a lot of radical Islamic theology. They've arrested some Muslim Brotherhood leaders already. I think they will now arrest hundreds or even thousands.
Won't that set some people on fire if that's done? I mean, won't that further enrage some?
I think it could, the supporters of the Brotherhood, but what the military will try and do is get the middle class and the students back off the streets and try and retake control. And again, let's distinguish between who's been out on the streets so far, the police and Interior Department militia, versus the military, where the real power is.
Why have we been propping up Mubarak all these years?
Well, I don't think it's really propping up Mubarak. I think it's a regime that's been in power since the overthrow of King Farouk in 1952.
We've been generous in money.
We've been generous in money beginning in the Carter administration because of the Camp David Accord. We have a profound interest in the stability of the Israeli-Egyptian peace relationship. We've got an enormously strong relationship with the Egyptian military. Mubarak, while no Jeffersonian Democrat, to be sure, has been an American ally for 30 years. These are not things you toss away lightly against the promise, the hope, the aspiration for sweetness and light and democratic government.
Is this, I mean, if you're sitting in the middle of the country tonight where you've got unemployment level of over 9%, why should you care about this?
Well, the price of oil went up dramatically today as people worried about the prospects for instability, not just in Egypt, but around the entire Arab world. Egypt is the largest Arab country, over 80 million people. But if the Muslim Brotherhood can bring down the government here and install a radical Islamic regime there in control of the Suez Canal, one can only wonder what will happen in the oil-rich kingdoms of the Arabian Peninsula. So there's a lot that rides on the outcome of this that will have a direct impact on America's economy and America's security.
Ambassador, thank you, sir.
Thank you.